Hey English, missing you guys already. It's Thursday, and I want to share some ideas of what you could be reading. I do recommend you guys are reading 23 minutes a day. Um, Got nothing but time right now. It really is such a benefit, you guys. It is brings up your vocabulary. The more you read, the easier it is to read long pieces of all different kinds. You'll have more stamina. The work that you'll have if you're going into college or if you're going into a job and you have to read long documents, reading just helps with all that. It also is a great way to escape from your house, which you might be stuck in right now. So I want to share with you, and I think I've told you guys about this book before, but it's one of my favorite books. And I'm a little limited in what I have around me and what's in my personal library right now. But Six of Crows is amazing. I absolutely love it. It's fantasy, but it's kind of a dark fantasy, and the magic part isn't a huge aspect. So it's not like Harry Potter where everything revolves around that. It's more revolves around kind of intrigue and sort of like thriller, but has magic elements. So if you're not sure you're into magic, this would be a really great place to start. It actually comes in, let me just turn it around. So there's actually another series by the same author in the same world, that it's the Grisha trilogy. You don't need to read that trilogy to read this book. I read this one first, and I didn't feel like I needed to read the other one. There's also a second book, so Six of Crows is a duology, so Crooked Kingdom is the next book. And there's actually now a third set of books that kind of combine these two sets of books into one set of books. And it's Kingdom of Scars. So I just want to share a little bit with this with you. If you like Ocean's 11, if you like sort of dark, kind of brooding characters, you'll like this. And I suggest you read it now because eventually, and they might be a little stalled on it now, but they will be creating Six of Crows, actually all of these, into a Netflix series, and I, for one, always think you should read the book first. Very, very rarely have I liked the movie or the show better than the book. So, Six of Crows, if this gives you a little bit of like an insight, it says no mourners, no funerals, of just kind of like the dark tone. You can see it in the kind of the coloring, black and red. That's just sort of kind of a dark tone. And so I always love fantasy stuff that has maps in it, so you can kind of see where they are. And this is, they travel throughout, so you kind of do need the map a little bit to kind of figure out where they are. Another map, the place that they are eventually going to try to break into. So, right, like, again, we see the kind of the dark shading, all as part of the tone. And her books always start with like one character who we never see again. So I'm actually going to skip that part because it kind of reveals some stuff and isn't about our main character. So I'm going to start with one of our main characters. I'm just going to read you guys a little bit. I think I might have read this in class, but it would have been a long time ago. And maybe you were busy at that time, but now this would be a really great time to pick this up. And you could get this via online through the KCLS or the King County Library System. You guys have access to that because you're a student. And if you need help accessing that, just let me know, okay? So here we go. Kaz Brecker didn't need a reason. Those were the words whispered on the streets of Ketterdam, in the taverns and coffee houses, in the dark and bleeding alleys of the pleasure district known as the Barrel. The boy they called Dirty Hands didn't need a reason any more than he needed permission to break a leg, sever an alliance, or change a man's fortunes with a turn of a card. Of course they were wrong, Inej considered as she crossed the bridge over the black waters of the burst canal to the deserted main square that fronted the exchange. Every act of violence was deliberate, and every favor came with enough strings attached to stage a puppet show. Kaz always had his reasons. Inez just could never be sure if they were good ones, especially tonight. Inez checked her knives, silently reciting their names as she always did when she thought there might be trouble. It was a practical habit, but a comfort, too. The blades were her companions. She liked knowing they were ready for whatever the night might bring. She saw Kaz and the others gathered near the great stone arch that marked the eastern entrance to the exchange. 3 words had been carved in the rock above them: Inet, Verent, Alment, industry, integrity, prosperity. She kept close to the shuttered storefronts that lined the square, avoiding the pockets of flickering gaslight cast by the street lamps. As she moved, she inventoried the crew Kaz had brought with him: Dirks, Roddy, Muzzin, Keeg, Anika, and Pym, and his chosen seconds for tonight's parlay, Jesper and Big Bollinger. They jostled and bumped one another, laughing, stamping their feet against the cold snap that had surprised the city this week, the last gasp of winter before spring began in earnest. They were all bruisers and brawlers, culled from the younger members of the dregs, the people Kaz trusted most. Inez noted the glint of knives tucked into their belts, lead pipes, weighted chains, axe handles studded with rusty nails, and here and there the oily gleam of a gun barrel. She slipped silently into their ranks, scanning the shadows near the exchange for signs of the black-tipped spies. 3 ships, Jesper was saying. The Shoe sent them. They're just sitting in First Harbor, cannons out, red flags flying, stuffed to the sails with gold. Big Bollinger gave a low whistle. Would have liked to see that. Would have liked to steal that, replied Jesper. Half the merchant council was down there flapping and squawking, trying to figure out what to do. Don't they want the Shoe paying their debts? Big Bollinger asked. Kaz shook his head, dark hair glinting in the lamplight. He was a collection of hard lines and tailored edges, sharp jaw, lean build, wool coat snug across his shoulders. Yes and no, he said in his rock-salt rasp. It's always good to have a country in debt to you. Makes for friendlier negotiations. Maybe the Shoe are done being friendly, said Jesper. They didn't have to send all that treasure at once. You think they stuck that trade ambassador? Kaz's eyes found an edge unerringly in the crowd. Ketterdam had been buzzing about the assassination of the ambassador for weeks. It had nearly destroyed Kurt Zemeni's relations and sent the merchant council into an uproar. The Zemeni blamed the Kurt suspected the Shoe. Kaz didn't care who was responsible. The murder fascinated him because he couldn't figure out how it had been accomplished. In one of the busiest corridors of the Stadthal, in full view of more than a dozen government officials, the Zemeni trade ambassador had stepped into a washroom. No one else had entered or left, and when his aide knocked on the door a few minutes later, there had been no answer. When they broken down the door, they found the ambassador face down on the white tiles, a knife in his back, the sink still running. Kaz had sent Inez to investigate the premise after hours. The washroom had no other entrance, no windows or vents, and even Inez hadn't mastered the art of squeezing herself through the plumbing. Yet the Zemeni ambassador was dead. Kaz hated a puzzle he couldn't solve, and he and Inez had concocted 100 theories to account for the murder, none of which satisfied. But they had more pressing problems tonight. She saw him signal to Jesper and Big Bollinger to divest themselves of weapons. Street law dictated that for a parlay of this kind, each lieutenant by 2 of his foot soldiers, and they all be unarmed. Parlay. The world felt like a deception, strangely prim and antique. No matter what street law decreed, this night smelled like violence. Go on, give those guns over, Dirk said to Jesper. With a great sigh, Jesper removed the gun belts at his hips. She had to admit he looked less himself without them. The Zemeni sharpshooter was long-limbed, brown-skinned, constantly in motion. He pressed his lips to the pearl handles of his prized revolvers, bestowing each with a mournful kiss. Take good care of my babies, Jesper said as he handed them over to Dirk. If I see a single scratch or nick on these, I'll spell forgive me on your chest and bullet holes. You wouldn't waste the ammo. And he'd be dead halfway through forgive, Big Bollinger said as he dropped a hatchet, a switchblade, and his preferred weapon, a thick chain weighted with a heavy padlock, into Roddy's expectant hands. Jesper rolled his eyes. It's about sending a message. What's the point of a dead guy with Forg written on his chest? Compromise, Kaz said. I'm sorry does the trick and uses fewer bullets. Dirks laughed, but Inez noted that he cradled Jesper's revolvers very gently. What was that about? Jesper asked, gesturing to Kaz's walking stick. Or what about that? Jesper asked, gesturing to Kaz's walking stick. Kaz laughed with low and humorless. Who'd deny a poor cripple his cane? If that cripple is you, then any man with sense. Then it's a good thing we're meeting Giels. Kaz drew a watch from his vest pocket. It's almost midnight. Inez turned her gaze to the exchange. It was little more than a large rectangular courtyard surrounded by warehouses and shipping offices. But during the day, it was the heart of Ketterdam, bustling with wealthy merchants buying and selling shares in the trade voyages that passed through the city's ports. Now it was nearly 12 bells, and the exchange was deserted, but for the guards who patrolled the perimeter and the rooftop. They'd been bribed to look the other way during tonight's parley. The exchange was one of the few remaining parts of the city that hadn't been divvied up and claimed in the ceaseless skirmishes between Ketterdam's rival gangs. It was supposed to be neutral territory, but it didn't feel neutral to Inej. It felt like the hush of the woods before the snare yanks tight and the rabbit starts to scream. It felt like a trap. "This is a mistake," she said. Big Bollinger startled. He hadn't known she was standing there. Inej heard the name the dregs preferred for her, whispering among their ranks, the Wraith. "Gills is up to something." "Of course he is," said Kaz. His voice had the rough, abraded texture of stone against stone. Inej always wondered if he sounded that way as a little boy. If he'd ever been a little boy. "Then why come here tonight?" "Because this is the way Père Haskell wants it." Old man, old ways. Inej thought but didn't say, and she suspected the other dregs were thinking the same thing. "He's going to get us killed," she said. Jesper stretched his long arms overhead and grinned, his teeth white across his dark skin. He had yet to give up his rifle, and the silhouette of it across his back made him resemble a gawky, long-limbed bird. "Statistically, he'll probably only get some of us killed." "I thought that's something to joke about," she replied. The look Kaz cast her was amused. She knew how she sounded, stern, fussy, like an old crone making dire pronouncements from her porch. She didn't like it, but she also knew she was right. Besides, old women must know something, or they wouldn't live to gather wrinkles and yell from their front stoops. "Jesper isn't making a joke, Inej," said Kaz. "He's figuring the odds." Big Bollinger cracked his huge knuckles. "Well, I've got a lager and a skill of eggs waiting for me at the copper room, so it can't be the one to die tonight." "Care to place a wager?" Jesper asked. "I'm not going to bet on my own death." Kaz flipped his hat on his head and ran his gloved fingers along the brim in a quick salute. "Why not, Bollinger? We do it every day." He was right. Inej's debt to Père Haskell meant she gambled her life every time she took on a new job or assignment, every time she left her room at the Slat. Tonight was no different. Kaz struck his walking stick across the cobblestones as the bells of the Church of Barter began to chime. The group fell silent. The time for talk was done. "Gills isn't smart, but he's just bright enough to be trouble," said Kaz. "No matter what you hear, you don't join the fray unless I give you the command. Stay sharp." Then he gave Inej a brief nod. "And stay hidden." "No mourners," Jesper said as he tossed his rifle to Roddy. "No funerals," the rest of the dregs murmured in reply. Among them, it passed for good luck. I'm going to stop there, but if your interest is piqued, again, Six of Crows, pretty interesting. I love it. It's one of my favorite books, and everyone that I've recommended it to who has read it has fallen in love with it. So check it out, you guys. Check out anything. Check out what KCLS or the King County Library System has to offer you. Try to get some reading done, 30 minutes a day, and I am here to answer any questions that you guys have about writing, about the packets the district sent home, about your grades, about anything I can ask you. You guys can also view the other videos on my channel. I feel like such a YouTuber right now. If you want any review on how to write an introduction or a conclusion, or if you want to write body paragraphs, let me know what else you guys want as videos so that I can film them for you guys while we are apart. Okay? I look forward to seeing you next video. Bye, guys!